to the board. I appreciate the invitation. So, yeah, we want to keep it interactive today. So, as Janet said, we will be using the chat function. I'd love to hear from you at different points throughout this presentation. But let's get started. I'll tell you just a little bit about me. I am passionate about creating more human organizations. And I talk a lot about belonging and inclusive culture, why it matters at work. And if you were at the Nahara conference and you heard my session, that is the topic that we talked about. And so today's topic about psychological safety kind of takes that to the next level. Psychological safety is one of those things that is really foundational for being able to have a workplace where people feel like they can belong and where they feel that they are accepted and included. So, my purpose in life is to help bring out the best in everyone I interact with. Sometimes I succeed at that when I live my intention and I'm paying attention to that. That is always my goal. So I'm looking for light. I'm looking for, you see this beautiful light behind me? I live in Montana in the mountains. And so I have lots of opportunity to seek out those bright spots in nature. But I try to do that within organizations as well. What is the light that we have? How can we bring it out and make it brighter? Because there's plenty of darkness in the world. So I came to this country many years ago from Oslo, Norway, and I've always loved a good adventure. So everything, I look at everything as an adventure. Life itself is an adventure. And this work that we all do in human resources and supporting the humans in our organizations, it's an adventure, right? Anytime we work with people, there's adventure. All right, so with that, I want to share a little bit about our organization, Purpose and Performance Group. The purpose of this organization, of the reason we do what we do, is to create thriving communities by helping people and organizations connect with their and to activate that shared purpose. And so that means getting clear on what is the ultimate good that we're here to achieve. Do we know what that is as an individual, as an organization? And then we work with all the people processes within the organization to activate that and make that come to life within the organization. Now, I put some tips and thoughts together for how to get the most out of an online workshop. And I said turn your camera on because I love to see your faces. But since Janet already asked us to turn them off, let's keep them off. But I would recommend that you have a pen or something to write with handy. I'm going to ask you for some reflections and some input from you because there's a lot of expertise in this room. And you have a lot of share. So I would love for us all to learn from each other as well. We have a raise hand button that you can use if you want to say something, and you are more than welcome to um, just use that raised hand so that Janet and I can keep an eye on if you have something you want to say. And I just ask that you mute yourself when you are not speaking. And then when you have something to say, you can unmute. And you can also use the chat function to interact, to ask and respond to questions. All right, and then we have our little quick reactions. Yes, Janet's giving a thumbs up, so we can use those buttons also to interact. All right, well let's get into it, guys. Oops. I would love in the chat if you could give us your name, which I can't see everybody at the same time. So in the chat, if you will type your name, your role, and your place of work, and then why you chose to attend today. I'd love to hear, just see some of the whys, the purpose for you being here today. So just type into the chat your name, your role and where you work, and why you chose to attend today. All right, we've got Tara Reed, Employment and Recruitment Manager at Cherokee Indian Hospital. Welcome. Judith Wright. Judy is attending to broaden her perspective. Dustin. Topic is something that's been part of my purpose since entering the HR profession. I love it, Dustin. Thank you for sharing that. Jana always loves to hear best practices. Luke is here because Hannah is always helpful to hear from. Thank you, Luke. Nahara is a great bringer together of good people. I could not agree more. And the topic is relevant for all leaders today. Juwan, topic is important for our company. Yeah. Title of the presentation drew me in. Always ready to learn more. Adaze, I chose to attend because I want to develop a welcoming and safe workplace. Yeah, that's great. Dorothy's ready to learn. Julie, need best practices ideas for our organization. And the in-person at the conference was amazing. Well, thank you, Julie. All right, from Tal, looking forward to positivity and how to support our members and partners. Psychological safety is a hot topic. Yes, it is. Gaining strategies and best practices. Okay, so thank you all for sharing some of your reasons for being here and your purpose for coming today. So what are we going to talk about today? We are going to do a little warm-up activity to start, and then we're going to talk about this contrast, fear and safety, because really the problem that we're solving here is fear. And we're going to talk more about why that is. We'll look at the stages of psychological safety. We're going to do a little activity around that, where I'm going to ask you to do a little reflection and think about some strategies that you can use in your organization with your team. We'll talk about intentional leadership and what that means and why it's relevant in this conversation. And we'll leave plenty of space for discussion as we go. All right, so next question for you. What are you afraid of? And it could be anything. It could be, yeah, I'm not gonna put ideas in your head. We all have things that we're afraid of. So if you feel free to share, you can take a moment to think about it. But just if you feel so comfortable, drop it in the chat. What are some things that you're afraid of? Fear of the unknown, fear of failure. Yes, those are definitely two big ones. What else? What other fears do we have? Failure and disappointing others. Yeah, disappointing others can also feel like a failure sometimes. Being unable to support mental health challenges for employees in a remote environment. Yeah, Dustin, I see you on that. That's a tough one. Fears of disappointing people, fear of failure, fear of losing good people because of our environment or our lack of support. That people overall are forgetting about kindness and respect in the workplace. Yeah, Morgana, we see that more and more, right? We've been talking a lot about this sense of nihilism and um, just cynicism that's out there. And how do we solve for that, right? The antidote is hope. And as HR leaders and as leaders in our organizations, we are ambassadors of hope. Fear of bad leadership. Yeah, lots of fears, right? So how do we feel when we're afraid? Happens? Um, what happens to our brains when the brain is experiencing fear? The brain interprets that as a threat. Okay, and our brains cannot differentiate between a physical threat, like a literal an animal is chasing me and I'm going to lose my life kind of fear, or a psychological fear, right? So, a psychological fear, some of the things that you mentioned in the chat are things we would consider a psychological fear, right? They're not a physical threat, but they are a psychological threat. When we feel fearful, we jump into that kind of survival mechanisms that are default, that are wired for, right? And we've all learned different survival mechanisms. We've learned how to respond to threats, and some of those strategies that we've learned are helpful. All of them, to some extent, our brains believe that they have kept us safe. That's why the brain employs them, right? We're all here today because we made it this far. We've survived. The brain's number one job is to keep us safe, right? So when the brain is under threat, it goes into either a fight response, where the goal is to confront that threat or overpower it, right? And we get confrontative. For some people, it might mean literally fighting. For others, it might show up as I got to just do more. I got to just push harder. I got to just get through this. If I can just like work more, work harder, do more, I can confront this threat and I will overpower it, right? Because I'm feeling that things are going to fall apart or things are not right. Or we get into a flight response where we just run away from the threat, either by literally backing away, walking away, running away, turning our back on it, or just simply avoiding the whole situation, right? That's the goal. The goal for the flight response is to avoid. Or then we have the freeze response, right? Where we just shut down and ignore it. This isn't happening. This isn't happening. No, this is not happening. That's the freeze response. And the goal here is to not be the focus of the threat. If we can just be small, not make any waves, not push anybody's buttons, right? So we are not becoming the focus. And then there's appease. That's one that maybe isn't talked about quite as much, but we find ourselves here quite often, right? And some of us we all have one or two of these that are our go-tos, right? And some of us use one of these strategies more than the other. These are default reactions that our brains deploy without us even sometimes being conscious of it, right? So they are strategies that the brain chooses, but it's not necessarily that we're logically thinking about it and choosing that reaction. It just happens. The appease, we're trying to agree or comply. Whatever you say, I'll go along with it. Even if I don't agree, I'm just going to appease and go along because my goal is to minimize the harm of this threat. So those are some of our brain's reactions, right? That happens to us when we feel under threats. Anytime we're fearful of something, the brain is trying to deal with that threat in one of these ways. It's also true for our people, right? Our team members, our employees. It's also true for our leaders, the people we report to. We all have these different kinds of survival strategies or methods that are our reactions to fear when the brain feels threatened. So, okay, so I put you in the frame of mind of thinking about fear and what that means. Let's kind of reverse that and create a contrast here. By contrast, when I feel safe, what does that mean? So I'd love to hear from you again. Think about, before you chime in the chat, take a moment to think about a time where you felt completely safe. It could be when you were a child, it could be when you, as an adult, it could be at work, it could be in your personal life. Just recall a moment in time where you felt completely safe. What was happening in your life? Who was there with you? What were the circumstances? And feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. Dustin says family reunions and gatherings. Yeah, often when we're with our people, we feel really safe. When I'm with my immediate family, time is precious. Yes, Janet, it is, isn't it? So here's some other thoughts. Being home with family. What are some other situations when you have felt completely safe, or where you feel the most safe? Let's hear one or two more thoughts. Jana, when I know my boss has my back. Yeah, we know somebody's looking out for us. And especially that person who report to. Good input. Let's hear one or two more. I'm good at silence, so I will sit here silently until I hear from you. Luke, when somebody recognizes a unique strength of mine. Interesting. That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, I feel safe when somebody sees me and in a way that they can recognize what I'm good at, what I do well, when people pay attention to that. From Tal, we're lifelong friends and walks with my dog Monkey. My dog Rocky, he definitely is that walking and running companion for me as well. If I take him with me out in the mountains, um, he he is definitely a protector. Yeah, so what we're solving here, and I just want to remind you to mute your microphone if it is not muted. We're hearing a little bit of background noise here from one of you. Okay, yeah, so the problem we're trying to solve here is one of fear. And if we're going to create an environment that feels safe, it's helpful to recognize what are people afraid of and how do we eliminate those fears. And when we understand why people react the way they react when they feel under threat, or simply recognizing that when people act out, there's usually some kind of underlying fear, right? So if we can get curious about not what is wrong with this person, but maybe ponder what happened to this person, or get curious about what really matters to this person, we can perhaps understand their behavior better and help to mitigate some of that fight, flight, freeze, or appease kind of behavior. All right, so let's talk about what is psychological safety. There's a few different pieces to it. One of it is that the belief that speaking out with ideas, problems, questions, and mistakes in the workplace is safe and will not result in punishment or embarrassment. And that's where every leader in the organization has a tremendous responsibility, right? Because if we as the leader allow our fight or flight responses, our survival mechanisms to, to get the better of us, we can inadvertently, even if it's not intentional, we can create a situation where people don't feel safe to speak up, right? So if we respond harshly, or people feel like they're getting punished for trying something or making a mistake, or they feel like they're being embarrassed by speaking up, right? That is something that can put people on edge and put them out of that safety zone. Psychological safety is also a sense of expectation and confidence that your opinion is valued, respected. So, do we really hear people? Do we take their thoughts seriously? Do we value and respect what they have to say? Those are part of creating that sense of confidence and expectation that it's okay for me to speak up and to have a voice in this organization. Psychological safety also involves more than just being polite and withholding something because of the fear that it might be unpleasant. It comes down to being upfront and honest. So it's not about sugarcoating things or withholding information or not being honest for fear of offending somebody. It's creating that environment where we can talk about the difficult things. We can have productive conflict where we recognize that it's safe to disagree. It's safe to be able to talk about things that are a little, maybe they're counter to the popular opinion, right? And so allowing for those voices, maybe the minority opinion, to also be able to be heard, where we can dance with those uncomfortable situations and thoughts and be able to talk about them, right? That is part of psychological safety. It's also a sense of permission for candor, assuring employees that their voices will be heard. So, how do we do that, right? If we shoot people down or we don't acknowledge when people try to be heard, they're probably not going to continue doing that, right? So, if we give people permission, and sometimes that literally means saying, and Nicole on our team, she was on the call earlier, she's really good at this. She does this for our team, right? She will literally say, permission granted. You have permission to have an opinion, to take care of yourself, to speak up. It's okay, right? Permission granted. And sometimes we have to make that explicit. And then finally, we've alluded to this already, psychological safety does not imply a lack of conflict. There are ways to have conflict that's productive, right? In order to improve anything, there has to be some kind of conflict. If we get into groupthink and we just say yes to everything without being honest, without looking out for pitfalls or what could be problematic, right? We are not going to evolve and we're not going to become the best version of our organization or our team. So, being able to have conflict in a way that's productive, that's another skill of creating a psychologically safe environment. And there's a difference between, we're not going to go deep into conflict today, that's a different workshop, how to handle conflict. But think about the difference between task conflict versus personal conflict, right? When conflict becomes personal, that's when it becomes problematic. If we can have task conflict and recognize that it's not about personal, being personal, it's not just because I disagree Doesn't mean I don't like you, right? I may not disagree with everything you say, or I may not agree with this idea. But if we can talk about that and together collaborate in a way that can help improve the idea or the initiative, right? That is a sense of conflict that's helpful and productive. So just something to keep in mind, right? We want to actually create an environment where it's okay to disagree and it's okay to debate things, right? That's part of psychological safety. So, what could happen in our organization if we eliminate fear? And if we eliminate fear, what do we replace it with? So, again, pause for a moment. What are your thoughts? I'd love to hear it. Please share them in the chat. What could happen? Imagine a team or an organization without fear. Progress, yes, absolutely, Dorothy. What are some other outcomes that we could realize? We would probably have more confidence, yes. Ideas and innovation are moved to the forefront. Absolutely, Dustin. We would have higher trust, more effective collaboration, proactive ideas with collaborative outcome. We'd have better communication. We might take more chances. Yes, Katie. What else? Progress for the future, productive conflict. Yeah, so if we can eliminate fear, there's a lot of really positive outcomes. Yeah, Terry Lynn, we would be more innovative. We'd have more personal successes. What would we replace fear with? And I'm just curious. There's not a right or wrong answer to this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would we, if we eliminate fear, what do we replace it with? Respect. Yeah. What else? Ooh, peace of mind. I agree, Janet. Understanding, motivation, and determination. Supporting people. We'd feel more relaxed. What about love? I know this is a little controversial. It's not a word we talk about a lot in organizational contexts, but I think there's a case to be made for loving people and showing people, like connecting with them in a meaningful way where people feel seen, they feel heard, they feel valued. And that looks a lot like love. And if we could infuse more love and connection within the human system that we're part of, that might be a good replacement for fear. So some good thoughts, just a little bit of a thought experiment there. If we can get rid of fear, what takes its place? And that's, I think as humans, right, we have these two polar opposite experiences, fear versus love. Are our decisions made because we're afraid of something or we're trying to avoid something? Or are they made because we're trying to approach something? Are they made out of love for people, love for our organization, love for our community, love for the outcomes that we could realize if we worked together? Is it because we're trying to approach something or avoid something, right? Those are both responses that our brain has. We're either in a protective mode, and we see that in our body language. When we have closed body language, we're kind of protecting, right? Because we're protecting ourselves from, whether it's just from the elements. I live in Montana where it can get quite cold, so I'm cold a lot and I might do this, right? This is a protective stance. But we do this also when we feel uncertain, when we feel insecure, where we're not sure, right? So that's protective. Connective body language is when we're open, our head's high, our shoulders are down, right? We have this more open body language that shows that our nervous system is in a connect mode. And that's really what our bodies are experiencing at all time, right? We're either seeking to protect or connect. And becoming aware of that, I think, is helpful, right? Am I being protective right now? Get curious about why. Because when we're in protect mode, we're not able to connect in a meaningful way with the people around us. When we are um, when we're seeking connection, we are more open and our body language communicates that. So neither of those two are wrong. There are reasons why we feel the need to protect or be protective. And again, like I said, our brain's number one job is to keep us safe and to protect us. But sometimes it's helpful to gain that awareness of when I'm being protective, get curious about why. Is it, am I able to make a shift so that I can be more connective? I can throw out bids for connection with the people around me, with the people that report to me, with the person I report to, with my peers, right? So each of us carry influence. We're all leaders. Whether we have the title of a leader, whether we have people reporting to us or not, we lead by our presence. So our body language and our presence can be part of helping to eliminate fear. And if we become aware of when we're acting out of fear, that can help us perhaps make different choices. So, some of the behavioral outcomes that we see, why psychological safety is important, we'll go through them one by one here. But primarily, psychological safety is something that helps to increase participation by integrating different voices and perspectives. So, it improves engagement, creativity, collaboration, and it drives innovation for teams. And we'll talk a little bit about engagement today as well, because that's one of the outcomes of psychological safety. All right, so high psychological safety behaviors, we see things like open dialogue, people sharing their ideas and opinions confidently. They have their behavior and their mindset is fearless. Emotions are welcomed and acknowledged. I think this is a big one, right? Recognizing that every emotion is valid. There is no wrong emotion. Our reactions to emotion can be helpful or unhelpful, okay? But the emotion itself is valid and not wrong. And that goes for ourselves and the emotion that we feel and the emotion that our team member feels or our leader. Emotion is valid. And so we welcome that and we acknowledge every emotion as valid and welcomed. And when we can become aware of what we're feeling, we can choose our response rather than just our knee jerk fight or flight, freeze or appease reaction. We also see that team members solve conflict productively, and they're able to have productive conflict. And we also see conversational turn taking, where leaders speak last. They allow their team to be heard and to share their thoughts and ideas before the leader weighs in with their thoughts. As a contrast, and I won't dwell on this one, but the low psychological safety behaviors that we see are silence or self-censoring. People do not feel confident speaking up, so they keep their opinions and ideas to themselves. There's fear of being ignored, ridiculed, punished, or fired. Emotions are ignored or bottled. There's conflict avoidance because we're afraid of the consequences of conflict. We have not learned that it is safe to have conflict in context. There might be negative consequences for honest mistakes. And there might be an unwillingness of leaders to consider the opinions of their employees. Okay, so we're going to pause. We have about 5 more minutes. So I just want you to pause for a moment and reflect on what you've heard so far, and then write down one key takeaway and drop it in the chat. What is one key takeaway from what you've heard so far? I am responsible in creating a safe environment for those I work and live with. Yes, Tal, that is a really, really valuable takeaway. We're responsible. We influence the experience of others. The importance of self-awareness. Yeah, thank you, Judy. Have not heard the appease with fight or flight. Yeah, it's part of our survival strategies. Weighing in at the end to encourage more independent feedback and participation. Thank you, Barb. Yeah, I think when, as someone who always felt responsible for starting the conversation, right? If I was that kid in school, if the teacher asked the question and nobody answered, I wanted to help the teacher out. I felt responsible. So I always started by weighing in first, right? I had to learn that practice later in life that sometimes when I speak up first, people don't feel confident to share their opinions. So I've learned to ask for others' input first, and then I share mine. Psychological safety creates the opportunity for people to learn how to approach fear with more awareness, not just serve their first instinct to fight, flight, freeze, or appease. Yeah. Prioritize encouraging leadership to purposely allow staff to speak first to encourage an employee to be heard. Yes, Dustin, psychological safety techniques must be led and supported by leadership to have a positive and sustained effect on the organization. Absolutely, 100%. And culture starts at the top. And yes, we can create pockets of local culture that insulates from the larger corporate culture. Each individual leader has a tremendous influence on the experience, and I talk about workplace culture specifically here, right? As a climate, each leader can set the tone for their team, but senior leaders has an important role, have an important role in that as well. All right, so engagement, right? And the employee experience is really what leads to engagement. And things like value alignment, organizational support, organizational participation. Do I feel like I have a voice? Is my voice heard? And the sense of fairness. Those are things that contribute to engagement. And really, engagement comes down to contribution, right? It's a fulfilling, positive, work-related state of mind that's characterized by vigor, dedication, and absorption. But I love this quote here, right, by Simon Sinek, that when people are financially invested, they want to return. When people are emotionally invested, they want to contribute. And that's what we get when people are engaged. So I know we're running up on time, so I just want to give you these 4 stages and kind of leave you with this takeaway, right? What stage are we in our organization, in our community, in our tribe. So inclusion safety is the first level. Employees feel safe, valued, treated fairly, and believe that their experience matter. Learner safety is second level. Employees feel safe to learn and grow. They ask questions, they give and receive feedback. Contributor safety. Employees feel safe contributing their ideas. They feel they can use talents and abilities to make a difference. And then challenger safety, where employees feel safe to challenge the status quo and see positive change opportunities. And so I just want to leave you with that thought and think about that, right? What we see often is when we ask organizations or individuals to kind of rate themselves or their team environment where they're at, we often see level 1 and 2. Level 3 is not as frequent, and level 4, that takes a really high level of psychological safety to be able to challenge the status quo and to see positive change opportunities. So as we kind of wrap up the conversation today, I want to respect the time frame that we have. Think about that and think about ways that you can work with your leadership team, right, to create more inclusion, safety. Maybe we can expand that to where people really feel safe to learn and grow. How can we set our organizations up where people really feel safe contributing their ideas, right? Where they feel that it's okay, that I have a place here and that my ideas and opinions are valued and welcomed. And can we get to the fourth level, right? Do we get to the place where it's okay to have conflict and to be able to challenge each other, challenge the status quo, actively seek to become better? So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Janet. I appreciate all of you coming today. If you want to connect with us, if you want a copy of the slide that I shared today, feel free to reach out to me, Hannah at purposeandperformancegroup.com, Hannah at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and you can connect with our organization there as well. So thank you for being here, Janet.
Hannah, do you have a slide that has your contact information?
I do. Let me pull that up. I've got
Okay, I will.
stop sharing and go to that slide because the controls here are a little different. So let me.
I can put you up too.
Okay.
Did that
Okay.
work for everyone?
Can you see that? So Hannah at purposeandperformancegroup.com. If you want to learn more, we could spend, we actually have a half day workshop on this topic. So trying to cram in half day into 45 minutes is you're basically getting the highlight reel, right? But if you want to learn more, we definitely have a lot more information on this topic, and we'd love to have conversations with you and how we can support your organization in creating higher levels of psychological safety.
This is great. Now, if I wanted a copy of your presentation that you presented today, can I email you and get a
Yes,
copy of that?
please
Okay,
just send me an email directly, Hannah at purposeandperformancegroup.com, and I will send that right out. I'll get it out to you today.
wonderful. And I open it up for any discussions if that's okay with you.
Yes.
People want to turn on their mics, and we have Hannah for another 10 minutes. So would love to hear any comments, any questions, any successes you had in your organization, any challenges. Would love to hear from y'all. And if also too, I wanted to let everyone know that Purpose and Performance, y'all have a podcast, right?
We do,
Can
yes.
you can you
Um,
talk a little bit about that?
sure. It's for intentional leaders. So anyone among us who want to be intentional about how we approach leadership, how we approach our organizations, um, learning more about that, we have guests on. You can find the podcast on any podcast platform. It is called Magic in the Room. Magic in the Room for Intentional Leaders. And the slide that I had up earlier had the podcast on it. I can put it back up. But if you search on any podcast platform, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, you can find it by searching for Magic in the Room. And every week there's a new episode. Every Tuesday is a new episode, but you can go back. We have well over 150, closer to 200 episodes. And this entire year, we have been talking about different aspects of intentional leadership. So we have different guests that we're talking about, that we are exploring these ideas with. My colleague Luke, who is on the chat today, as well as Chris Provins, who some of you know. The three of us are co-hosting it, and so it's either the three of us or one or two of us with a guest. And we have meaningful conversations every week about the kinds of topic that you heard today, anything that has to do with being intentional about leadership.
Awesome. I included it on the chat box as well
Thank you,
for
Janet.
everyone to go in there. Yes. There's
Yeah,
a
Terry,
message from Terry Lynn.
I see that. I'd love to connect with Terry Lynn when you have some time. So just feel free to reach out, shoot me an email, and I'd love to set up some time to chat. And if any of you there want to talk more about these topics, yeah, I'm just an email or a phone call away. So shoot me a note. We'll find some time to talk.
Well, thank you so much, Hannah. Truly appreciated you being with us today. It's always a pleasure and love learning from you. And for those who are on the call, we will have the session on our Nahara YouTube channel by this Friday. And for our members, the session will be on the membership page on the Nahara website.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today.
Thank you, guys.